Welcome to This Explainer. All right, let's jump right in. Today we're looking at one of the absolute most electric, high-stakes periods in modern Indian history. Between the years 1928 and 1934, the Indian subcontinent was essentially locked in this massive, intense political chess match between the Indian National Congress and the mighty British Empire. This wasn't just a time of polite petitions and stuffy debates. No. This was the era where the very definition of freedom shifted. The masses literally took to the streets, and the foundations of the British Raj were shaken to their core. We are going to visually unpack exactly how this extraordinary struggle unfolded.
So here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We'll be covering the demand for Purna Swaraj, salt and civil disobedience, the truce and Karachi Session, the roundtable conferences, and finally, the Communal Award and Poona Pact.
Section 1. Demand for Purna Swaraj, the shift from dominion status to complete independence.
Okay, to really understand this massive shift, we've got to look at the mounting frustration of the late 1920s. Back at the 1928 Calcutta Session, younger, more radical leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose forced a major ultimatum. They basically said, grant India dominion status within 1 year, or the goal becomes complete, untethered independence. Well, following that ultimatum, the British government tried to sort of placate the nationalists. In October 1929, Viceroy Lord Irwin issued a declaration promising dominion status. Eventually. But there was absolutely no timescale. It was completely vague. Indian leaders immediately responded with the Delhi Manifesto demanding a concrete constitutional scheme, which Irwin just flat out rejected. So the crucial takeaway here is that this British delay and rejection led directly to the famous December 1929 Lahore Congress Session. It was there, right on the banks of the River Ravi, that Jawaharlal Nehru hoisted the tricolor flag and the Congress officially adopted Purna Swaraj, complete independence.
To formalize this bold new goal, January 26, 1930 was declared the first Independence Day. All across the country, in villages and towns, people gathered to read the Independence Pledge. And what's truly powerful about this pledge is its devastating critique of colonial rule. It didn't just politely ask for political power. It explicitly laid out that the British connection had ruined India in 4 distinct ways: economically, politically, culturally, and spiritually. It boldly declared that submitting to this rule any longer was a crime against man and God. So the ideological stage was now set for direct action.
Section 2. Salt and Civil Disobedience, the masterstroke of mass mobilization.
Now the Congress had the clear mandate for Purna Swaraj. Before launching into full-blown rebellion, Gandhi first presented 11 specific demands to the Viceroy. These ranged from reducing the army budget to lowering land revenue. When the government completely ignored this final ultimatum, Gandhi made a choice for his catalyst that honestly baffled a lot of people at first. Out of all the heavy political and economic issues facing India, why base a revolution on a simple kitchen condiment? I mean, it sounds almost absurd at first glance, right? But it was actually a stroke of absolute strategic genius. It turned a lofty philosophical demand for freedom into a tangible, universal fight.
Think about the logic here for a second. Everyone, from the wealthiest merchant down to the most destitute farmer, needed salt to survive. By taxing it, the British were essentially slapping an inhuman poll tax on millions of starving people. Opposing the salt tax was this incredibly universal grievance that completely bypassed dangerous social divides like caste or religion. Plus, the act of making salt offered the rural poor a huge psychological boost through self-help while giving city dwellers a powerful, highly symbolic way to identify with mass suffering. It was, quite literally, the perfect unifying spark.
So, the plan was set into motion. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi, alongside 78 ashram members, began a grueling 240-mile march from Ahmedabad down to the Gujarat coast. But you have to understand, this was never just a walk. For nearly a month, as they marched toward Dandi, the entire world watched. Thousands upon thousands thronged to join them or just witness the procession. When Gandhi finally reached the beach on April 6th, bent down and picked up a lump of salt, he officially broke British law. It was a clear, unmissable signal broadcast to the entire Indian population. You too have the power to defy British-made laws.
And defy they absolutely did. The breaking of the salt law at Dandi triggered an avalanche of mass participation. The idea spread like wildfire. In Tamil Nadu, C. Rajagopalachari led his own salt march. Over in Malabar, K. Kellappan did the exact same thing. Down in Andhra, activists literally set up military-style camps to coordinate their protests.
In the industrial town of Sholapur, textile workers went so far as to establish a parallel government. And in landlocked areas like Bihar, where making coastal salt just wasn't practical, they pivoted brilliantly to a massive refusal to pay local chowkidara taxes. The entire subcontinent was rising up.
But as you might expect, with mass defiance came brutal state repression. Interestingly, though, when Gandhi was arrested, the movement didn't die down. It only intensified. Activists marched directly on the government salt depot at Dharasana. The American journalist Webb Miller was actually there and witnessed the chilling scene. Unarmed, completely peaceful Satyagrahis walking right into brutal police lathi charges. He noted that not a single marcher even raised an arm to fend off the blows, writing about hearing the sickening whacks of clubs on unprotected skulls. 2 people died and over 300 were injured. The sheer, unshakable, non-violent discipline of the marchers in the face of such sickening violence stripped away any remaining moral legitimacy the British Empire claimed to have. It broadcast the harsh reality of colonial rule to the entire globe.
Section 3. Truce and Karachi Session, negotiations on an equal footing.
The sheer scale of this civil disobedience, the massive boycotts that were practically crashing British cloth imports, and the huge loss of government revenue, it forced a massive shift. The British realized it simply couldn't arrest their way out of this crisis. So, in an unprecedented move, the Viceroy actually released Gandhi to negotiate. The resulting Gandhi-Irwin Pact of 1931 was a massive psychological victory. For the first time ever, the Indian National Congress was negotiating on an equal footing with the British government. The Viceroy agreed to release political prisoners not convicted of violence, return unsold confiscated lands, and crucially allow coastal villages to make their own salt for personal consumption. In return, Gandhi agreed to suspend the mass movement and travel to London to participate in constitutional talks.
Shortly after this pact was signed, the Congress held a truly historic session in Karachi in 1931. While they did endorse the truce, what makes the Karachi Session so legendary are its groundbreaking resolutions. This is a real game changer. For the very first time, the Congress explicitly defined what Purna Swaraj would actually mean for the common person on the street. It wasn't just about kicking the British out anymore. They passed resolutions guaranteeing fundamental rights like free speech and a free press, and laid out a national economic program promising living wages, substantial rent reduction, and state ownership of key industries. They firmly and permanently linked political freedom with the economic liberation of the starving millions.
Section 4. The Roundtable Conferences, the talks in London.
Having suspended the movement back home, the battlefield shifted from the dusty roads of India all the way to the grand halls of London to discuss India's constitutional future. This was in the wake of the deeply unpopular Simon Commission report. However, these conferences proved ultimately, futile. The first conference was entirely boycotted by the Congress, making it effectively meaningless. Thanks to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, Gandhi did attend the second conference as the sole representative of the Congress. But it was a complete disaster. The talks completely deadlocked, largely over the incredibly complex issue of minority representation and safeguards. The British right wing absolutely refused to concede any real power. So, by the third conference, the Congress was back to boycotting, and the talks were pretty much ignored by Indian leaders. The constitutional route had basically hit a brick wall.
Section 5. Communal Award and Poona Pact, the social divide.
With the failure in London, civil disobedience briefly resumed back in 1932. But it faced immediate, ruthless government repression. However, the most profound crisis of this entire phase wasn't just British pushback. It was a deep internal social divide. In August 1932, British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald announced the Communal Award. This established separate electorates for various minorities, but crucially, it extended those separate electorates to the depressed classes, granting them 78 reserved seats. Now, to Indian nationalists, and especially to Gandhi, this was seen as a catastrophic threat to national unity. They viewed it as a direct British attempt to permanently fracture Hindu society. In protest, Gandhi, who was sitting in Yeravada jail at the time, began a highly publicized fast unto death.
The entire nation literally held its breath as Gandhi's health rapidly deteriorated. This intense life-or-death crisis forced immediate negotiations, which eventually led to the Poona Pact. Under this incredibly difficult compromise, the demand for separate electorates for the depressed classes was abandoned. But in exchange, the number of seats reserved for them in the provincial legislatures was dramatically increased. It pulled the nation back from the brink of Gandhi's death for sure, but it fundamentally altered the trajectory of political representation for marginalized communities in India.
This whole moment really highlighted some deeply nuanced ideological differences. On one side, you had Gandhi. He viewed his campaign against untouchability as this moral movement to purify Hindu society from within. He called the depressed classes Harijans and sought their gentle integration. On the other side, you had Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who completely rejected this paternalistic approach. Ambedkar demanded a radical, structural dismantling of the caste system itself. He fought for absolute political empowerment and guaranteed rights for his people. While both leaders were fighting against the evils of untouchability, their visions for exactly how to achieve true justice were profoundly different.
Which brings us to the legacy of this incredible transformative era. Between 1928 and 1934, India witnessed the fierce, unyielding demand for Purna Swaraj, the unifying strategic genius of the Salt March, and the drafting of truly visionary economic rights at Karachi. But as the Communal Award and the Poona Pact revealed so clearly, the struggle wasn't just against the British. It was also a very real struggle within. So we really have to ask ourselves, did the political and economic resolutions of this explosive era truly dismantle the deep social divides within India? Or are we still, in many ways, striving to fulfill the total promise of Purna Swaraj today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helped you visualize and understand this pivotal chapter of history.